Thanks, Jen. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. I'm glad you could attend and hear about a topic where we get a lot of questions about, how to migrate to Rhapsody. I've got existing data in a variety of different formats. So we thought this would be a good topic to discuss on our webinar. And just so my introduction, I am the Rhapsody market manager, in case you don't know me. I've been around for quite some time working with Rhapsody in a variety of different capacities. But today my role is a Rhapsody product marketing manager. And joining me today is Thomas Capelle from Sodius. And Tom, maybe you want to do a quick intro?
Sure, thanks. My name is Tom Capelle. I am the president of Sodius. We are a longtime partner of IBM. Both as a technology partner, we provide the XMI toolkit for Rhapsody, the rules composer, which we'll touch on today a little bit, as well as the ADA code generation for Rhapsody and System C code generation for Rhapsody.
Thanks, Tom. So basically what we want to talk about today is some of the reasons that we get a lot of requests of people wanting to move to Rhapsody, some of the advantages they're seeing with Rhapsody, and then just trying to set some goals and what the expectations are with the actual reuse and bringing in your existing IP and assets. The assets can be in a variety of different formats and a lot of different tools out there, and we get a lot of requests for different tools and different things that want to be brought in. So you have to kind of decide how you actually bring in everything, what you want to bring in, and then how you want to move forward with the content you're bringing in. There's a lot of reasons that you're trying to move to Rhapsody, and you need to make sure you have a clear goal in mind before you start that migration. And then we're going to talk about some of the different capabilities Rhapsody has with reverse engineering code, importing from other tools, and then Tom is going to go over the rules composer and how that can be used to do model transformations and things like that that can really bring in a lot of data that you might want to bring in to Rhapsody. And also I want to touch on another different approach of using Rhapsody Design Manager and how that can be used to bring in existing models into your design environment. So to begin, when you ever start a new project, you're never really starting completely fresh, or it's very rarely. You always have some assets around, and these can be in a lot of different formats and a lot of different tools. You could have, certainly you might have code, then you might have models and all kinds of different tools, example, Rhodes models, or there's system architect models, or there's models from other, competitor tools. Also, you might have some documentation you want to use. You want to bring that in. And generally what happens is you start to bring in all that information, and then you start to either modify that those existing assets, or you're going to add new features which would probably surround those existing capabilities. So you're basically adding some new feature onto your product. So you might be saying, I'm going to add a new radio capability perhaps on your, the radio in your car or something like that. Maybe your scan capability, or maybe you're going to add something new into something that's existing. But generally, it starts from scratch. So you want to take that and then you want to reuse it. Now, it comes down to, moving into you want to use some newer technologies and things like that. And that's where a lot of folks that we talk with, they want to move to Rhapsody. And a lot of the reason is that maybe either their existing tools just didn't scale to their capabilities that they had. They want to be able to use simulation and the advanced capabilities that Rhapsody can have of generating a production application onto an embedded target board. Rhapsody has been doing this for many years, targeting the embedded systems market and performing systems engineering. So we've been applied to very large projects, and we can scale to those large projects. So companies are coming to us asking us to move to Rhapsody so they can find defects earlier by doing testing, reducing their development time through the code generation and automation capabilities that Rhapsody provides, And then once they're in Rhapsody, of course, there's a lot of different sharing capabilities of sharing the Rhapsody models amongst the development team. And we'll kind of touch base on a little bit of that as well. But basically, we'll see that Rhapsody is a very scalable solution that's been used on very large projects with hundreds of users with very, very large models that are working in an effective fashion. And you can see some of the capabilities from an analyst study showing that when using a traditional approach, it takes much longer. That's without model-driven development. Using some of the other tools out in the market, you can save maybe a $250,000 on your project. But when you're using Rhapsody, you can save even more money using those automation capabilities that Rhapsody provides. So, jumping a little bit further onto what we have all the great capabilities of Rhapsody, but how do you get there, and how do you get into using Rhapsody from the existing approach? Really, the first thing you kind of need to do is what are you going to try to do with those existing assets? And there's a few different options. You can basically take your existing models and designs and just kind of use it as reference, meaning that you'll look at it in your design in Rhapsody. You might want to look at existing information to see how things were done to get some more insight. Or you might want to do traceability from a Rhapsody design to that existing design. One of those examples might be systems engineering, where you're handed a model from maybe another tool, and that's your specification. And now you're going to do software development. So you want to trace and link from your new Rhapsody design to that other design. So you can do that by creating trace links. But in this case, you don't necessarily care or need to bring in all the data into Rhapsody. You just bring enough in to do your traceability and get a view of what's in the design. Another option is maybe you just want to include your component in the design. So basically this means that, well, you have some existing asset. It runs. It might be running for many, many years. It might be a safety critical component where you've developed it for many years. You've already done certification on it. You don't necessarily want to redo that. You want to kind of reuse it, but build your application in Rhapsody around that item. So we have ways of plugging those existing components into the Rhapsody design. And so basically this might be something you might do also with like a third party. So if you had a third party library and you wanted to use it, you could plug that into the Rhapsody model and basically connect the interfaces to it. So it's a way of reuse without, you're not necessarily taking everything from that design. You're not going to be changing it, but you're using it within the Rhapsody model. Rhapsody is very flexible, allows you to bring in things like this. So you may even be doing further development on that component. It could be a different development group, but you can plug it into the Rhapsody model and then do simulation and execution with it and build an application with that existing code in there, or that third-party code. Another thing you might want to do is basically, this is probably the most effort in some cases, to bring in the existing design and models and bring them completely into Rhapsody and then do complete further development in Rhapsody, which is a great way to move forward. And that's where you can start to take advantage of all the capabilities that Rhapsody provides in simulation and code generation, which I already mentioned. So in this case, you can do a complete import and then move forward in the Rhapsody model. So there's a few different ways of approaching it. Now, so how can Rhapsody help in all these different ways and help you get to there? So Rhapsody has a lot of different APIs and a lot of ways of bringing in data. And here's kind of a laundry list of the various ways, and I'm going to get into more details on each of these in the upcoming slides. One is through code reverse engineering. You have existing code, we can bring in that existing code. Why I mentioned this in a model reuse webinar? Well, a lot of modeling tools actually generate code. So one way of bringing in model data is to generate code from those other tools and then reverse engineer that code. And so this is a kind of a good technique that you can use to bring in a lot of data as well. But there's also code out there, so you can bring that in. In the Rhapsody world, we consider the code as part of the model. Model and code are the same thing because we have the capability of dynamic model code associativity. So code is just another view of a model in our world. So these capabilities tie in. We have a great capabilities that can bring in all this code into the design. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is using XMI as an OMG standard way. Generally, most UML or SysML tools have this a capability to import and export XMI. And, of course, every vendor, even though this is a, quote, standard, as we all say, each vendor has some subtleties that they of course, follow, and, we're not all following the standard to the letter always, which can be a problem. So we've created some importers for, where we get requests for, often we get requested for importing from Sparx Enterprise Architect. It's a popular tool out there, and, but when people have been using it, they find, they get to a point where they can't do all the capabilities I mentioned earlier about model validation and scalability and so on, and they want to apply it to real production embedded system development. And that's where they'll turn to us and try to bring in their designs. And this is why we've done some specializations of our XMI to handle a lot of the things that are in the Sparx designs to bring those in. Additionally, we have the things such as Rose RT. We have a lot of legacy modeling products out there, and we can use XMI to bring in that kind of data. Additionally, beyond XMI, we have other capabilities, including direct import of Rose. So there's a lot of legacy Rose models out there. We can bring in those designs. We have a tool that will allow us to do that, and also Rational System Architect, where there might be some designs out there. This is particularly meant for DODAF type designs. And then, of course, and Tom's going to talk about this, model transformations with Rules Composer, how you can do more advanced type import of models out there with its capabilities. And then I mentioned earlier about how you incorporate blocks or components within your application. One thing is there's a lot of modeling out there with MapWorks Simulink. And, Simulink, it doesn't really map into a UML tool such as Rhapsody. So what we can do is you can plug in Simulink blocks, and the Simulink interface that allows you to do code simulation and can synchronize with those Simulink blocks. There's already another webinar recording on this series. I have a link there, so if you want to hear more about the Simulink interface, I'm not going to talk about that here today, so you can check out that webinar and find all the information. Similarly, there's some other legacy tools like SDL and StateMate that you can work with in a similar fashion. You can plug in blocks as well. And then lastly is Rhapsody Design Manager. This is a new capability. I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with it, but basically it allows you to, it kind of breaks down the barriers of, instead of saying, well, I want to move one tool to another, it just says, well, let's leave the data in those various tools and start to share that data. Using the capabilities of OSLC and Jazz technologies out there, you're able to bring in that information and start to share and collaborate on it. So this is more of working by reference and not bringing into Rhapsody directly, but it allows you to do that traceability and linking and sharing that information. And then also one thing to note, Rhapsody has an API with Java, and there's also a COM API as well that you can use to do basically anything with Rhapsody. So it's highly customizable. So if you need to do things of creating scripts or doing some more detailed kind of transformations of things or creating models, it's really powerful that you're able to create a lot of things in that. One example, we use our system engineering toolkit, you may have seen, that automates a lot of the creation of diagrams and so on in Rhapsody. That's built through our Java API. So you can see an example of all the capabilities that's possible.
Paul, before I let you move on, I did have a question about your last chart, which is in terms of the add-ons to Rhapsody that are needed for each of those different functions, can you take a minute and talk about the different capabilities and where they might be found in the product itself versus in a specific add-in?
Okay. So let me start with, let's go from the top. So code reverse engineering is available in the software versions of Rhapsody. So this would be Rhapsody Architect for software, and Rhapsody Developer for C++ and Java for Rhapsody Developer. And the Architect version contains reverse engineering for C++, C, Java, and C#. The Rhapsody developer includes all of those just mentioned, and then it would also include do ADA reverse engineering as well. So you need one of those packages, and you can get that. So that would be in one of the base packages. XMI Toolkit is available in the Rhapsody Tools and Utilities add-on. So that's part of that add-on. The importing of rows and architect are in all the base editions of Rhapsody. So you just need an edition of Rhapsody. Rules Composer is itself an add-on, and we'll talk about later. The MathWorks interface is part of the Tools and Utilities add-on as well. And then Design Manager would also be a separate product as well. If anyone, I think that summarizes it. Hopefully that answers the questions. If not, you can always feel free to contact me if you have any questions, or you probably go to Jen. I don't know if my contact information was in here, but I'll be happy to address it further. And the Java API is in all the base editions as well. I should mention that. Okay. So first, let's talk about code. So Rhapsody, I'm not going to get into all the details of reverse engineering code. It's probably a topic on its own, and you can see down at the bottom I have a reference to another recording of a webinar on how to reverse engineer code. But what you can do is if you have existing code, you can bring this in, and you can start to visualize your design and your model. So you'll bring in structure diagrams. You can also create flowcharts for operation bodies. And then once it's brought in, you can either start to develop it with Rhapsody further, or you can just use it as reference. You can also link in existing libraries or code. So if you have third-party code, it's very easy to link it in. There's settings within Rhapsody to just link in the code and link in those third-party libraries. So it makes it easy to bring in and incorporate other code into the Rhapsody design. And basically, one of the advantages why it's really mentioned here in this model reuse is when other tools, basically code is code. So whatever the code is, even if it's generated from another tool, you can reverse engineer it in. Now, it's not necessarily a whole silver bullet here that everything can come in here. There's always things that you have to worry about. Sometimes there's macros and things, and some code generators had a lot of other, especially modeling tools, other than Rhapsody, of course, because our code is so easy to read. But other modeling tools, and they have macros and all kinds of things in there that might make things harder to bring in. So it'll take a little bit more effort on this. But you can bring in the design information, and usually you can get some structured information in here. So it's one example of bringing in designs. And the next one I wanted to talk about was XMI. So this is a much more model-to-model type import of things. So basically, it's a standard from OMG, IBM, and Sodius, which is one of the reasons why I've invited Tom onto our call here today, participating in the Modeling to Change Working Group to come across with some standards of exchanging models between the various tools. We know that a lot of tools, come up with their own interpretation of things. So we're committed to being able to work with the other vendors and exchange data there. And basically, I mentioned before, this is part of the Tools and Utilities add-on to get the XMI import capabilities. And you can go under Tools, Import, and it's a pretty simple operation. You can then choose from a number of different, you can see some tools there. So you get to see Sparx, Rational Software Architect, RT, Rational Tau, and then just from a generic XMI type capability. So it's pretty simple. It comes up, and then you select the file, and then the design is brought into Rhapsody. And there's not too much. Of course, you have to export your XMI from the other tool, so that's important that you do that first. And so one example is we're kind of walk through some of what you can do with the Sparx Enterprise Architect import. So this will allow you to migrate your model from Sparx, and we've done some modifications to our XMI because there's some things that were in the XMI that we're importing that didn't come out. It's hard to just handle with standard XMI. So, for example, importing of the diagrams, there might be primitive types or profiles or port contracts that we added constructs into our XMI importer to handle those kind of things within the XMI that's exported from Sparx. So when we look at the importing from Sparx, basically you go in and you do an export of XMI from them. You then choose to export diagrams, and choose your UML version you want to export, and then that's basically it. So once you select the export diagrams, you're going to get the state charts and sequence and activity diagrams from their model, and then what you can see is when it exports, you'll see things like this. So here's a couple of examples. I'll just show a couple of examples of what you get from the diagrams. You, of course, get the data as well, but you'll see that the diagram in the background on the left is from Sparx, and then now you can have a diagram that shows in Rhapsody how that same diagram would look. And
can I jump in for a second here? I did have a question for somebody who said in the past they had tried to do some of these conversions, and maybe the results or the resulting model wasn't quite what they had expected, or wasn't wasn't exactly maybe stellar results. Tom, I know you and your organization put this together. Can you talk about any updates to the product, or any enhancements that have been done either recently or kind of in the near future?
Sure. And first, I'll just make a global blanket comment that this whole interchange between various tools that are provided by different vendors, it's always a tricky subject because we don't control both ends of the transformation here. So there's always going to be a certain impedance mismatch between both of them, and some things may not come across as exactly as it was intended to. With that said, we do kind of dedicate specific releases to focus on a specific tool and a specific release of that tool. And for the person making that comment, the good news is this upcoming release, which I believe is June, this was the #1 development for the XMI toolkit, was to focus on the Sparx Enterprise Architect import. And you will see a vast improvement in that import, including a lot of the diagram stuff, and we tried to put some of the recent snapshots in here as well to show you a bit more the fidelity that you're getting, where we understand that in the past it wasn't so good.
Great.
And also, I'm making another comment here. I know that sometimes it's always not perfect, but we're also here to help. It's one thing, So in these cases, it can get complicated bringing data in. There's a lot of variables that need to be factored in as well. Even some things. Another thing that often comes up is, well, you customize your other tool to some way. So once you do those customizations, it's not kind of a standard data set that we're trying to bring in. So it ends up with some further complications. And, we can get involved, and I know Tom has been involved in a number of different scenarios. Don't want to commit Tom for all this time, but we can help. We do have a lot of experience on migrating various models from a lot of different accounts. So we can get engaged, and we're happy to help out with that situation. And if we can make improvements to the importing of whether it's XMI or whatever, then we'll do it. As you can see, what Tom mentioned, that we're making improvements, and I'm sure those improvements came from interaction with a customer that we've had. So.
Exactly, and that's a great comment to make, is our test models that we use to do these types of conversions are not exhaustive. And they could be corner cases which we don't handle, and this is why it's essential that any issues you have, if you could just fire off a support request to support, then we can get your exact case handled, because usually it's not a technical issue, it's just that we haven't seen it, and therefore the code isn't handling it correctly. And so just make us aware of it, and you'll be surprised that we can quickly turn around that probably in the next release.
Okay. And of course, I have to insert the standard IBM disclaimer about us committing to any releases. Plans are subject to change, since we talked about some future things here. But moving on, so here's just another example of a diagram coming in. You can see that this kind of diagram, this activity diagram is brought into Rhapsody. It's kind of a complicated activity diagram, and you can see it was rendered in Rhapsody. So just moving on a little bit, So we also have a Rose importer for those people. I know Rose is still, I mean, it's been around for quite some time. There's still people using it. And so we do have a pretty robust Rose importer. We've had a number of customers that have tried to use it and brought in their designs. And, you know, one thing you have to say, it's just going back, it isn't always, you know, perfect. And I know people have had different experiences with moving models. And, you know, we haven't made improvements over the years when we encounter these problems. You know, one example is the incremental import. We know some Rose models can be very large. We had some customers that were moving very large models, and we added these incremental importing type capabilities to allow for it, to help anyways on bringing in those designs. And we've also had a capability of bringing in the code from Rose to kind of merge those models. So you kind of go through a flow where, you know, you install Rhapsody, and then you open up the Rose model, and the Rose model does one thing: it has to be able to open in Rose. That sounds like an obvious kind of thing, but you know, you have to have a kind of proper Rose model. It has to not have errors in it and things like that. You know, because otherwise it can't come into Rhapsody if you don't have a model that, you know, you can even open in Rose. We can't actually open enough to actually extract all the information out of it. So it has to be able to open in Rose. And then, you know, Rhapsody will configure. You know, you have to configure Rhapsody some to, you know, accept the project, and then you start the import process. And you additionally might want to do some post-processing. You know, in all of the techniques I'm describing here, I'm not going to claim it's a silver bullet that brings in everything and all. It's perfect. You know, there's these cases, these exceptions, these corner cases that might have to be dealt with, and that's where we can help and try to do some of the customizations that Tom is going to talk about in a minute or two, or just working with you on, you know, improving the things we have. We can get we have a lot of experience in bringing this in. We know it's gone through a lot of customers, so we know it brings in much of the data, but, you know, there's always the exceptions that we have to handle. And that's where we can get involved and really help out on doing that. Another tool that we can migrate from is RoseRT. Now, RoseRT has a lot of, it's kind of structured a little bit differently than other, let's say, standard UML tools. I mean, it uses UML, but it's got some different kind of architecture around it. So it kind of can be a challenge to bring in RoseRT type designs in. And there's a few different options. So we've had a number of customers asking for this, and we have some strategies of bringing this in the data from RoseRT. There's a different ways. I mean, there isn't necessarily a perfect one-to-one mapping between Rhapsody and RoseRT and Rhapsody. So there's some things, steps that need to be taken, and there's some pros and cons to doing these things. And it's all about, again, I mentioned earlier, setting expectations of what you can actually bring in and what you'll end up with at the end. And you can, for one thing, you can bring in and convert the RoseRT model to a pure Rose model. So that keeps you all your structure of your design. And from there, what you can do is bring in, you know, you can basically recreate that structure within Rhapsody. So you basically have a starting point that you can go from, or use, and maybe you're just using it again as that reference that I mentioned, but just being able to go from there and then do your Rhapsody model around it. But, you know, there's going to be some data loss there. You can also bring in into generated code. RoseRT generates code. You can bring in, reverse engineer the code generator from RoseRT, and that'll bring in a lot of the model data that you have. But you're going to lose the graphical information. So that's kind of a bigger challenge. Another option that you have, and this is probably, at this point, probably the best option available, is to migrate through Rational Software Architect Real-Time Edition. And this would be through XMI. I mentioned it a couple slides ago where I showed there's an XMI import that we've customized, we've tailored for RSA real-time. And this is basically to allow for migration of RoseRT models. You know, so this has got, you know, you still might have, so it's not completely perfect, that there still might be some loss of, you know, some behavioral information, but most of it's there, and your structure information is there. But there might be some manual editing that you have to do. There's a document actually in the Rhapsody documentation actually for all these capabilities in the XMI toolkit, there's PDF documents for the XMI capabilities for Sparx, General XMI, and for the RSA-RT and the steps that are needed. You basically have to install a diagram exporter plugin into RSA, and that's going to allow you to generate the diagram information so that that can be pulled into Rhapsody. So when you do go through RSA-RT, you actually will get the diagram information into Rhapsody. So additionally, we also have a system architect importer. So system architect, basically it's been used, as legacy, generally in the DODAP, TOGAF type area timeframe. And we have an importer which has been around for quite some time that's used for basically the DODAP type information that can be brought into Rhapsody. So basically you can take in and import the DODAP information. As you know, this would you want to have the Rhapsody, the DODAP and MODAP and UPDM add-on to bring in this information for it to make sense. But you can take in this information, bring it into Rhapsody, and then you can view the system information and do further development within Rhapsody for the DODAP information. But usually people would want to bring in more of the business type logic from DODAP and SA, and then do more of the system engineering or systems views in Rhapsody. And there's a mapping file that allows you to do customization with System Architect. So this is an option to bring in System Architect. A little later on, I'm going to mention another way of bringing in System Architect information using Design Manager. So at this point, we should the point about talking about Rhapsody Developer Rules Composer. So I'm going to let Tom talk about Rules Composer.
Sure. So Rules Composer, the first statement kind of says it all. When the out-of-the-box import capabilities, or more generally export-import capabilities, are not enough. You can go to the API, you can do other things, and one of the other tools you have is a separate add-on called the Rules Composer add-on. And with that, you can start to build custom importers or exporters for your own formats, whether these are formats that are standardized but just not supported with the out-of-the-box Rhapsody add-ons, or your own internal or legacy applications are using these. Or when you look at what's provided out of the box and the source or the target are the same, but the way you want to import, you want to improve, not necessarily because what's being done is wrong, but maybe because the way you were modeling, let's say you're doing a migration from a legacy system or from, take Sparx Enterprise Architect. You used Enterprise Architect as you were starting modeling and you put a bunch of stuff in there, but now that you've gotten experience, you want to apply a profile as you import because you were just using pure UML in Enterprise Architect and you want to map it to maybe SysML. So you can get under the hood to modify these imports and exports that Rhapsody provides. And this is done through the Rules Composer. So you can see your sources. It's kind of like a debugger for models. You can see how the models are put together, all the information you can get to, and then you can change the mapping, right? So this is a transformation from one domain into Rhapsody. So you can get in and see all the different pieces you can get to and then describe what patterns you're looking for and what the new pattern should be in Rhapsody. The Rules Composer itself was used in a couple different ways. So it's used for the XMI toolkit, right? So as I just said, if you don't like what Enterprise Architect, the way it's being imported, you can get the Rules Composer and change that mapping. The Rules Composer is also how the Ada code generator was built. So you can kind of use it to build custom code generators. And if you go to the next slide, we have a little bit more detail about what it is. So the Rules Composer itself, it's a development environment, right? So the screenshot, which you could probably barely read in the last slide, was actually an Eclipse development environment for model transformations. This development environment really lets you generate any text or model information or more XML or anything from your Rhapsody designs. And this is from or to, so use it to bring information in or out of Rhapsody. So it's rules-based because it's a transformation. So you can almost think of it as pattern searching. So you're kind of going to look through a pattern on one side and describe what that pattern should be on the other side. And so there's lots of different things that you would expect out of a Eclipse development environment that help you debug powerful browsers, etc. And then there's an ability to generate this application. So you can kind of push a button from Eclipse, and it will embed your generator or export or importer inside of Rhapsody so you can deploy it to the rest of their users. So typically you have one guy who's the genius who knows how the mapping should be done, who is then going to capture his knowledge of a set of rules and going to let the whole rest of the team use his rules without necessarily the ability to change them, which may be bad if everyone customized their own importer. So that's the rules composer.
Thanks, Tom. Sure. So now another aspect I just wanted to touch base on, a way of reusing models is, well, using Rhapsody Design Manager. So in this case, it's more of from reference. All right, I have these models, and instead of saying, well, let's move everything over, it's kind of using this federated sort of approach and saying, well, let's leave it there and then kind of share and collaborate on the designs and models. So this is using OSLC, and it's based on our Jazz platform. It creates a central kind of hub of your design information and allows you to collaborate on those design information from a website, for example. You can access a Rhapsody design from just a web browser. So if someone doesn't want to use Rhapsody, they can access the designs from from a web browser and view those designs. They can do review and markup. They can, and then also link to those designs. Now, right now we have a Rhapsody on there. We have a Rational Software Architect, and it's also possible to store Simulink designs up on Design Manager. So this allows you to bring up Simulink and allow them to be stored up there. And we are going to be developing, we also have a OSLC integration with Rational System Architect. So I mentioned before there's a System Architect importer, which brings in DODAP information. What the Rational System Architect integration with OSLC allows you to do is create traceability links from your design, like a Rhapsody design, and link that over to a System Architect design. So basically, you're accessing the System Architect design through Design Manager, and you're not doing any of the migration over. You're just kind of reviewing what design is over there. So you can create links that say, here's this block in Rhapsody, here's how it relates to some artifact, maybe it's an operational node or something in System Architect. You can show that traceability within the design. So this allows you to kind of create similar capabilities as far as traceability goes, as we find a lot of times that's basically what people want to do with the System Architect design, is just bring it in and be able to reference it. And this will allow you to do that through OSLC. Additionally, there is a design management SDK, and you can see this, it's up on jazz.net. And what this is going to allow you to do is create basically integrations with Design Manager of, even if you have an in-house tool, you can bring that information and bring it up onto Design Manager. Or maybe even third-party tools. So if a third-party company wants to bring up their information on Design Manager, they can do that. And this information is up on jazz.net if you go there to see how to use Design Manager and share this type of information. So just a little kind of example of with System Architect and OSLC. So what you can do is create links to, you can create links to design architecture. You can also create links to other things like doors and work items in Team Concert and so on. Basically anything that's on OSLC, you can create links to, which is great because you can just go in and everything becomes URL addressable, and it's very easy to navigate across the designs. There are rich hover capabilities as well, so that if you're in System Architect, you can rich hover over an element, and what will come up is what's linked to the other end of it. And so for one example, you might be able to see a Rhapsody diagram that's linked to a System Architect design through OSLC. So it's really an easy way to view data from other tools without actually moving completely to this other tool set. So the users who want to use Rhapsody can use Rhapsody. The users who want to use System Architect can use System Architect. and then they can still share data and see data from between all the other tools, and it's linked together with one another. Similar capabilities are with Simulink. So the Simulink designs are published within Design Manager. You can do sharing of those designs across the team. You can do navigation and linking into the elements of Simulink to a Rhapsody model element. And this also gives you a way of linking Simulink elements to Doors Next Generation, and this would be through OSLC. So if you want to use Doors Next Generation, you can do that with this capability by linking through OSLC to Doors Next Generation requirements to the Simulink design elements. And you can do all the capabilities that are in Design Manager of reviewing, sharing, and so on. And we don't have enough time to go over that in detail on this, all the capabilities of Design Manager. I'm not sure if there might be another webinar here for this, or if not, we could probably have one. And that allows you basically to share all those design information in a common place. So basically, I'm at the end of my materials here. I just want to kind of summarize on what you hear. Rhapsody, why people are moving to Rhapsody is, it's been a proven solution. It's been used in the development of a lot of embedded systems and systems engineering, even for things of, safety critical in nature. Rhapsody has been applied there, and we've seen companies have been seeing improvements of about 50% in their development time, which can be significant if you think your development costs you $2 million, and you can be saving $1 million in your development time by switching over to Rhapsody. It also automates your development and testing. We have a lot of capabilities for doing simulation, model-based testing, which I didn't really get into in this type of webinar, but it automates that whole testing and validation process. That can really improve the quality of your design and really optimize the way you're developing. And there's a lot of ways of using Rhapsody, and there's a lot of ways of going over Rhapsody. I talked about code, XMI, direct imports, model transformations with Rules Composer. There's a lot of ways, and sharing with Design Manager. And there is no silver bullet here necessarily. It's not always going to be perfect, but there's a lot of ways to customize it, and we're here to help. Tom is on the call with us today. Here, and there's a team available that's done this before, and we've brought in a lot of different designs into Rhapsody, so we can really help and try to get over some of the hurdles of the things that you're trying to bring in. I know we've worked with a lot of customers that in some cases they'll try and bring in, do some customizations and tailoring, and then it improves our overall solution to migration. And we think we have the experts involved that can do that. So. Just to summarize, if you want to learn more about this, this is my plug for Innovate. One thing I just wanted to raise, there actually is a session on moving from RoseRT to Rhapsody. One of our customers did, and they're going to be presenting at Innovate. So that's the question I have highlighted in yellow there. I think if you want to hear more about that or all the capabilities of Rhapsody, Rhapsody's got a great set of topics and a great schedule lined up at Innovate for basically system engineering, software development, and a lot of good customer talks are planned there. We've got a lot of great customers that are speaking on how they've used Rhapsody, so it's great to hear. You're not going to be hearing, actually there's very few marketing presentations, so that's probably a good thing. It's all customers speaking, so you won't hear a lot of sales pitch, but more from your customers, so that's a great thing. And I think Tom is also speaking as well on the system C code generation capabilities that Sodius can provide for you. And then another plug, the Rhapsody Sandbox trial. If you want to try out Rhapsody, it's available online. You don't need to download it or install it. You can give it a shot, try it out for just 4 hours, and there's a couple exercises on using Rhapsody for system engineering or software development. So give it a try, and let me know if you have any feedback on it. I think that's it. Jen?
I do have a few questions that we queued up till the end. One of them was around importing rows models. So it seemed that when you were doing the rows section, it required for you to have rows and have rows kind of up and installed on your system. So the question is are there any plans to have Rhapsody have a rows importer kind of built into Rhapsody, again, given how rows has moved forward in terms of its, its support, right? So it's, are there other ways other than installing rows?
Yeah, unfortunately, because we're using the APIs of rows, we do need it at this point. I can't think of any plans, but this might be one thing that we could maybe work with, the sales team, and we can see, what we can do to actually get, whether it's a license question or things like that, we might be able to work with us, the customer to get something. That's probably the only option I can think of at this point.
Yeah, so maybe getting a temporary license of rows.
Yeah, temporary license is basically what I'm thinking. Yeah. If we knew that they were, it depends, in the case if someone's trying to get to Rhapsody and, it makes sense, then you can work through sales and probably provide the licenses.
Okay. I had another question, and this was about trying to move off of Artisan. Is there, how would you suggest doing that? It wasn't one that you specifically brought up, and what might be?
Yeah, that's always, that one is a little bit more problematic in our experiences with the XMI capabilities of Artisan. That there's a lot of customization type things that they've done. So, the best thing is going through XMI and see what you can get from there. We don't have any direct support, but we could probably do things, with some of the capabilities of probably Rules Composer that could help, I think.
Yeah, a couple of things with Artisan is, first of all of the UML vendors, Artisan, NoMagic, IBM, we're all collaborating in a model interchange working group as part of the OMG to try and get all of these models to interchange better than they do today. So progress will be made over time. But one of the issues is specifically with the current implementation of the Artisan export is it's missing some information. It's not valid XML in some parts, and not valid XMI, meaning it doesn't conform strictly to the UML meta model. And this adds complexity to importing things. And we fixed what we kind of could through the generic XMI import. However, since there's omissions in the XMI itself, there's not a lot we can do. With that said, I'll put on my Sodius hat. Sodius has done a custom migration from Artisan because you can get to kind of its native interchange format, which is not XMI at all, but it's a different type of file format. And we have done service engagement for customers to do specific migrations from Artisan.
Okay, well, thanks. Another question was, you didn't talk about maybe importing from a Word document or Excel table. So if you were bringing something in where you had some content, can you speak to how that import might go?
Yeah, that's a good point. So for Word or Excel, I probably would use the gateway capabilities, or treat it almost as if it was a requirement, or you could, depending on what the Excel is like, you could use scripts to bring in that information into Rhapsody. So those would probably be the options available.
I would use Gateway. I would agree with what you said, Paul. I think Gateway, especially around Word, they have a lot of functionality to kind of parse those Word documents. I think that's valid. Excel as well, you could use Gateway. The screenshot that was with the Rules Composer was actually a screenshot of a Excel document kind of viewed as a model. So if you do want to try the Rules Composer way, it gives you your Excel document as a model that you can kind of dig through and pull pieces in and kind of put them where you want in Rhapsody as well as another option.
So it seems like it depends what's in your Excel file and how it's organized, what the best approach might be. And just to clarify for folks, because the question came up earlier, Gateway is included in the Tools and Utilities add-in.
Yes.
So one question that came up, is there a list of the latest software code versions that Rhapsody can reverse engineer, for example, Ada 2006?
So I guess I didn't understand that question. Did you say?
So is it possible to import Ada 2006, or is there some listing of all the different kinds of code versions that you might be able to import? You mentioned just the coding languages, but does it matter whether it was a certain version of that language or certain?
Tom, do you know the Ada 1 probably?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does depend on the version. So Ada 2005 support for reverse engineering came out recently, I think within the past year or so. 2006 is not supported.
Okay. And there is, as part of Rules Composer as well, there is customization of the Ada reverse engineering rules. So you could modify the rules as well.
Okay, one question around, is there documentation on the XMI implementation in Rhapsody? And
yes.
Is that something that we can send out a link to?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we can. It should be in the. Trying to see if I actually have more information. I think it says importing resources topic in the information center. I believe that's the link. I'm trying to remember if it gets you to there. If not, if you probably do a search of XMI in the information center, it'll give you a listing. If that doesn't work, it's in the installation of Rhapsody in the Sodius doc directory. There should be PDF there.
Great.
Probably more ways of getting it than you really wanted. But if you go to the information center and just search for XMI, you should see a topic that brings up all the docs, the PDF docs.
So I have another question. If you still need a direct link and you were the requester of that, please ping me in chat. Otherwise, I'll assume that all of those descriptions.
You can see the link right there for the information center is on the slide I'm presenting right now, the top one, where it says HTTP TIC-PE so on. That's the link to the information center.
And we made that pretty rememberable, huh?
Yes. Sorry.
So another question is the XMI import-export fully functional in Rhapsody? Someone, I think, looked at it a little while back and said that it was not possible to fully import or export models created in Rhapsody.
Well, it should be. If it doesn't, then it sounds like maybe there's a defect.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a couple things around that. It's hard to say exactly what the issue is without any details, but one of the issues you can get into with XMI is huge models, and transforming huge models into the standard XMI format is resource intensive. So there's a couple things. All of this kind of runs on Java, and there's configuration files. If you look in the XMI toolkit documentation, it'll kind of show you what things you tweak, but you're basically tweaking the Java memory size. The other thing with XMI is you can do incremental exports. So instead of trying to export one huge model, if you take a portion of it, you can then export several different portions of it that also have these interrelated links to each other. So you're not losing anything. You'll get just separate XMI files with these cross-links in them. So that's one way that things can go wrong with XMI. It's just the sheer size. Other things, if you're hitting certain model constructs that are causing errors, that's definitely something we want to know about, because that should never happen. So if you can give us more details, I'd be happy to follow up.